Welcome to NTD News. I'm Kevin Hogan. Here are today's top stories. President Biden expressing support for a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel after pressure from some Democrats. Does he still support Israel's right to defend itself? The U.S. Supreme Court agrees to hear a case about a Mississippi abortion law. The court could use the case to make a significant ruling on abortion, including overturning Roe v. Wade. Officials in Maricopa County, Arizona are calling for an end to the audit of the 2020 election. That's while several Republican representatives defend the audit. Despite new CDC guidance on masks and social distancing, some vaccinated residents say they aren't ready to give up their masks. And a mechanic in central Mexico offers migrants a place to rest and eat during their journey north. Some continue to travel while others stay in Mexico. President Biden is now expressing support for a ceasefire between the terrorist group Hamas and Israel. It comes just a day after the U.S. voted against a UN statement calling for a ceasefire. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
We also believe Palestinians and
President Biden expressed support Monday for a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, following pressure from a group of Democrats. Senator Jack Reed is one of them. He's chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee.
The people who are suffering right now are really civilians, not as much military personnel. So this is something that really requires, I think, people to stop the fighting and start the talking.
China and other nations at the UN Security Council backed the ceasefire. They also want to condemn Israel's military response to being attacked. Meanwhile, a group of Republicans are supporting Israel and its right to defend itself.
The United States needs to stand foursquare behind our ally. And President Biden must remain strong against the growing voices within his own party.
Biden also reiterated his support Monday for Israel's right to defend itself. And questions are being raised about Israel's bombing of a building in Gaza that housed Al Jazeera and the Associated Press. Israel says Hamas was using the building.
They must produce adequate evidence that there was Hamas operating the building, that it was a legitimate military target.
An Israeli official says the evidence he's seen is crystal clear.
They'd taken what should be a civilian building and turned it into a legitimate military target because it was housing their military intelligence, it was housing their R&D, it was housing part of their war machine.
He says they've already shared the evidence with the U.S. government, and he says he thinks it's only a matter of time before all relevant U.S. officials see it. And Republican Senator Tom Cotton is asking a different question.
Why is the Associated Press sharing a building with Hamas? Did they knowingly allow themselves to be used as human shields by a U.S.-designated terrorist organization?
Cotton also questions the AP's reporting on Hamas and says the news outlet has some uncomfortable questions to answer. The AP says it didn't know Hamas was using the building. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
On Monday, President Biden and Vice President Harris released their 2020 tax returns. They disclosed the incomes for themselves and their spouses. This came on tax day, the individual tax filing deadline for the vast majority of Americans. Biden and First Lady Jill Biden earned a combined income of around $600,000. The President and First Lady paid just over $157,000 in federal taxes and slightly more than $29,000 in state taxes. Harris and Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff earned nearly $1.7 million in 2020, and they paid around $622,000 in federal income tax. The Vice President and the Second Gentleman paid an additional $182,000 in state taxes. The White House said this is the 23rd year that Biden released his taxes and the 17th year that Harris has done so. Top Republicans in Maricopa County, Arizona are defending the way they handled the 2020 election. They're calling on their colleagues in the GOP and business leaders to speak out against the election audit. That's while Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and two others are calling on the top Justice Department official to allow Arizona's audit to continue unimpeded. Here are the details.
The Maricopa County Board of Supervisors is calling for an end to the 2020 election audit that they call a sham. The board consists of mostly Republicans. They say the state Senate leader who was overseeing the audit has lost control of it. The chairman of the county's Board of Supervisors, Jack Sellers, said Senate President Karen Fann is attempting to legitimize what he calls a grift disguised as an audit. The vice chairman says it's time to move on.
We must do this as a member of the Republican Party. We must do this as a member of the Board of Supervisors. We need to do this as a country.
The board's comments come after the auditors found omissions, inconsistencies, and anomalies with ballots cast in Maricopa County. At the same time, firebrand Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz joined Marjorie Taylor Greene and 2 other representatives of Arizona, writing a letter to the DOJ. They wrote to Assistant Attorney General Pamela Karlan, saying she was bowing to liberal interests when she expressed concerns about the Maricopa audit. The letter also claims the election management equipment system was deliberately deleted before it was given to the state Senate for an audit. The county's board denies allegations that it deleted data from an election machine. In Gaetz' letter to the DOJ, he said, "I urge you to uphold your duty to preserve Americans' civil rights and support this audit, which will clear the air and restore election confidence, instead of trying to meddle in it." The letter says Gaetz and Biggs personally visited the audit, and they're confident in the integrity of the process and look forward to reviewing the results, no matter the outcome.
The U.S. Supreme Court takes up a significant abortion case out of Mississippi. Abortion opponents hope the court's conservative majority will overturn the 50-year-old landmark case, Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court has decided to hear a case about a Mississippi law that bans abortions after 15 weeks.
This is a case that could really lead to a dramatic altering of nearly 50 years of abortion rights rulings by the Supreme Court.
Eric Scheidler is the executive director of Pro-Life Action League. He says the Biden administration is pushing America toward a radical pro-abortion agenda.
We're going to see more efforts to force taxpayers to pay for abortion, to strip away conscience protections for medical workers.
The Supreme Court now has a 6-3 conservative majority, and that could be a game changer for abortion law.
Former President Trump has 3 appointees on the court: Amy Coney Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Neil Gorsuch. Barrett, when she was nominated, I think is probably fair to say, is the most openly anti-abortion justice who's joined the court in really, since Clarence Thomas. And
abortion opponents hope the case leads to a landmark ruling that allows states to restrict or ban abortion.
So I'm hopeful that we'll see a great ruling come next year, and that will be greeted with celebration by the American people.
Multiple conservative states passed laws intending to challenge Roe v. Wade. Lower courts struck these laws down, but those states are also prepared if Roe gets overturned.
Mississippi is also one of about 11 states that have so-called trigger laws that they've passed. These are total bans on abortion that would only take effect if and when the Supreme Court were to overrule Roe v. Wade.
The court is expected to hear the case this fall and make a ruling in the spring of 2022. The Supreme Court won't make it easier for police to enter homes without a warrant to seize handguns. The justices unanimously rejected the Biden administration's arguments that pushed for restrictions on the Second Amendment. This includes controversial red flag laws, which allow gun seizures from law-abiding gun owners with limited due process. Generally, police can't conduct searches of private property without consent or a warrant. But the case in question centers on a doctrine that gives officers leeway in cases of community caretaking. Here's the context for the case. In an argument with his wife, a Rhode Island man pulled out an unloaded gun and asked her to put him out of his misery. Worried he may be suicidal, the wife asked the police to check. While he was out, they seized his guns without a warrant and didn't return them. This ruling says caretaking duties doesn't justify warrantless searches and seizures in the home. Some U.S. residents say they're confused or distressed about new CDC guidance on masks and social distancing. They say they don't have any way of knowing who's been vaccinated.
The CDC eased social distancing and mask-wearing guidance for vaccinated people last week. But some residents are reluctant to give up their face coverings even after getting the jab.
I think it's going to be a while before I'm ready to be shopping in stores without a mask.
Landon Webb lives in Chicago with her 2 small children. She says she's concerned about not knowing who is vaccinated or not.
In restaurants and shopping and in areas where I don't know the people that are around us, I prefer for people to be wearing masks, especially for my 2 kids.
CDC guidance says that people still need to follow state regulations and the individual rules set by businesses. Some states have dropped mask mandates. California says its mandate will remain until the middle of June. Some stores and businesses still require masks for vaccinated customers, while others are following the revised CDC guidelines and say it's fine to go without masks after getting the shot. Dr. Anthony Fauci says some people may want to continue wearing masks after the pandemic to prevent colds and the flu.
I think that there's been a lot of confusion around the CDC guidance.
Some states and businesses are heavily promoting vaccines with public advertising campaigns and incentives. Some state officials say more people need to get a vaccine before they can lift restrictions.
Some concerning figures about the situation at the southern border. The Texas governor is saying there was an 800% increase in fentanyl intercepted at the Texas-Mexico border last month. Meanwhile, a former border agent admits she brought a foreign national illegally into the U.S. NTD's Allison Lee has the details.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott told Fox News last Friday that the border situation is dangerous not only because of illegal immigration, but also because of the uptick in deadly drugs coming across the border.
We had over an 800 or almost 800% increase April over April about the amount of fentanyl that has been apprehended by the Texas Department of Public Safety. We have obtained enough fentanyl coming across the border to kill every single person in the state of New York.
Abbott wants Americans to know how deadly fentanyl is. Just 2 milligrams of it can kill a person, he says. The governor then adds that Texas law enforcement alone has apprehended over 30,000 illegal border crossers and arrested 900 criminals. On the national level, Customs and Border Protection, or CBP, says they apprehended nearly 180,000 people at the border in April. That's the highest one-month total in 2 decades, and a tenfold increase compared to April 2020. The amount of heroin seized at the border jumped almost 100%, and fentanyl over 30% from March to April this year. And also on Friday last week, former CBP officer Rhonda Lee Walker of Texas pled guilty to helping bring a Mexican woman illegally into the country. Walker was a CBP officer when she helped the illegal immigrant cross the border in January and lied to authorities about their relations. Walker later made the migrant work for her as a nanny. The former border agent could face up to 10 years in prison and a maximum $250,000 fine. A U.S. District Court judge will sentence her in August. Allison Lee, NTD News.
A mechanic is offering Central American migrants who are making the long and difficult journey to the United States a place to stay and rest in central Mexico. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
8 years ago, mechanic Armando Vilchis opened his garage to welcome young migrants making the journey to the United States. It has become a place of refuge, offering them a chance to eat, shower, and rest before continuing their trip north or deciding to stay in Mexico and seek legal residency.
I opened the shelter because migrants are in such need. They were sleeping on the streets, underneath the bridges, under the train. They used to put some blankets under the train. So when I saw all this, I thought to myself, why not have a place for them if I can?
Sacks of rice are piled high near towers of tires, and laundry hangs out in the yard, hiding cars and parts. Bunks are covered by blankets for privacy. Everyone pitches in with chores, cooking, and sweeping. The route north is filled with dangers, from falling off the train to robberies and getting kidnapped by the cartels. Gina Flores is a pregnant Honduran migrant looking for a brighter future for her unborn son.
When you ask among the migrants, they tell you to come here to the Don Armando shelter, and here it's like you find a light to keep going. And thank God I did find it, because I was pretty bad mental health-wise, and now I am a little better.
Every year, more than 3,000 migrants arrive at the shelter in Metepec. It's funded by community donations and has managed to remain open during the pandemic. It doesn't get any financial support from the federal or local government. The dangers of the road are too much for many, and most of the 60 migrants at the shelter are instead focusing on a new life in Mexico.
My idea of heading to the United States has diminished. What I'm thinking is that I will see if I can arrange my papers straight here, to look for a good choice of work, and then see how I can support my family back home.
There are several reasons Hondurans are fleeing their country: pervasive violence, corruption, lack of jobs, and widespread destruction from 2 major hurricanes last November. In March this year, U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported more than 41,000 encounters with Hondurans at the U.S. southern border. That's some 12,000 more than March 2019. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Just ahead, Microsoft reveals it launched an investigation into Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. That's to look into an affair he reportedly had with a female employee. Gates left the company's board in 2020. And a former big tech employee is blowing the whistle after finding fake social media accounts based in other countries. They appear to be aimed at shifting public opinion. Find out more here on NTD News. The Senate votes to open debate on a measure to counter rising tech competition from China. The Endless Frontier Act authorizes more than $110 billion to cover education and training programs in key technology areas like artificial intelligence. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer says the bill is a way to make sure America leads the way in 5G, AI, and quantum computing before the Chinese Communist Party tries to control it, and that it's a once-in-a-generation investment for America. Schumer said the Senate will debate the bill for a week or two beginning on Tuesday. Other China-related bills are likely to be included in a final package. The White House says it supports the bill. In 2020, Microsoft board members determined that Bill Gates had to step down from the company's board. This was during an investigation into an alleged relationship the billionaire had with a female employee.
Microsoft on Monday said it had launched a probe into co-founder Bill Gates' involvement with an employee after learning that Gates had, quote, sought to initiate an intimate relationship. A spokesperson for Microsoft said it opened the investigation in 2019 when it heard concerns about the incident from nearly 20 years prior. The Wall Street Journal reported on Sunday that Microsoft board members wanted Gates to step down from the board as the investigation was underway into Gates' involvement with the female employee. The Journal reported Gates resigned before the investigation was completed. In a statement to the Journal, a spokesman for Gates said his decision to leave the board of Microsoft had nothing to do with his involvement with an employee. Gates' spokesperson described the relationship as, quote, an affair which, quote, ended amicably. The Microsoft spokesperson declined to comment on whether the investigation led to Gates leaving the board of the firm he ran for 25 years. The billionaire who co-founded Microsoft in 1975 and served as its CEO until 2000 said in March 2020 that he was stepping down from the board to focus more on philanthropy. Gates and his wife Melinda filed for divorce earlier this month after 27 years of marriage.
A former Facebook employee discovered that fake accounts were influencing public opinion, but the tech company has downplayed her findings. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Sophie Zhang worked as a Facebook data scientist for nearly 3 years before she was fired last fall. On her final day, she posted a lengthy memo in the company's internal forum. In the memo, first published by BuzzFeed, she offered evidence that governments in countries like Azerbaijan and Honduras were using fake accounts to influence the public.
And when I first found this, I was very naive. I thought that I'll hand it over to the right people, they'll take care of it, I can get back to my actual job. Instead, it was the start of a Sisyphean ordeal.
What's more, Zhang found coordinated activity from places like India and Ecuador, also intended to manipulate public opinion. She says Facebook didn't take her findings seriously. Facebook has not disputed the facts of Zhang's story, but has sought to diminish the importance of it.
So most of the coordinated inauthentic behavior work Facebook does, it's reactive rather than proactive. And by reactive, I mean it's in response to outside reports from NGOs, from outside organizations, from opposition groups, from news agencies, etc. And so the common thread between these is that there's someone outside the company who knows and is upset about what's going on.
Zhang's claims come as big tech continues to face criticism for its content moderation practices. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Record numbers of people died from drug overdoses last year. 2 factors are likely behind the surge. One is being cooped up in lockdowns, and the other is not being able to carry out their routines. NTD's Christina Kim speaks to an addiction expert to shed some light on this.
The CDC's data on fatal drug overdose shows drug deaths surged 30% in the United States last year. A graph shows the rising trend. In the 12-month period ending in October 2020, there were nearly 89,000 drug overdose deaths. And nearly all 50 states, except South Dakota and Alaska, show a rise in fatal drug overdoses.
The stage was already set for the perfect storm to happen.
Dr. Indra Sidambi, a psychiatrist and expert in addiction medicine, says this isn't surprising, especially given the pandemic.
As an addiction specialist, I was anticipating the number to go up, and so it did not surprise me.
So what is this perfect storm? Sidambi says drugs are readily available and very cheap. People began self-medicating, and many, especially women, couldn't ask for support because they were too busy juggling their many responsibilities. This was exacerbated because of the pandemic and lockdowns, because those seeking help couldn't find it.
The problem was these programs were not available in person. So they had to scramble. In the initial stages, we didn't even have any meetings that was going on. And so these people were already struggling to keep themselves sober, now had no more support.
One drug in particular seems to play a large role in the rise of overdose deaths: fentanyl. Dr. Sidambi says the country's fentanyl crisis starts with too much availability and that it's coming in from outside the country.
If we were to say, I'm going to be strict at the borders and stuff like that, that's not enough because you can buy it on the dark web. So I think awareness, education is very important. Educate people and say, this is a deadly one.
Sidambi says the first step to recovery is for people to speak openly about their problems. She says more than 50% of people can recover from outpatient treatments where they don't have to uproot their lives to get help. Sidambi says there's hope for recovery. She's seen addicts go on to stay sober and become successful. She says people can lead a truly dignified, quality life by taking good care of themselves. Christina Kim, NTD News.
Coming up, a murder trial is going ahead after a judge rejected a delay request. Multi-millionaire Robert Durst is at the center, charged with the fatal shooting of Susan Berman in 2000. In California, a dispute grows between private firefighting companies and public fire authorities. Authorities say private companies could make matters worse. Find out more on NTD News.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's book deal is worth $5 million. That's according to tax records released Monday. According to Cuomo's senior advisor, Rich Azzopardi, publisher Penguin Random House awarded Cuomo more than $3 million, with $2 million more to be paid over 2 years. Azzopardi told CNN the Democratic governor donated $500,000 from the book deal to the United Way of New York State for pandemic relief and vaccination efforts. He put the remaining money in a trust for his 3 daughters. Last month, New York State's chief financial officer asked the state attorney general to investigate allegations that Cuomo used state resources in the development and promotion of his book. Azzopardi called those allegations absurd. Cuomo's book is titled American Crisis: Leadership Lessons from the COVID-19 Pandemic. New York City's marathon is coming back. On November 7th, a limited field of runners will return to the starting line for the city's 50th marathon after the event was canceled last year due to the pandemic. The annual event draws thousands of cheering fans to the Big Apple. The 26.2-mile race is hugely popular with amateur runners and professionals alike. In 2019, it saw a record of over 53,000 finishers. This year's race will only see 33,000 runners compete. Race organizers said runners will be required to show proof of a negative CCP virus test or a vaccine, and they must follow government guidelines around travel and quarantine. Kentucky Derby winner Medina Spirit will not contend in next month's Belmont Stakes. The New York Racing Association temporarily suspended the horse and its famed trainer, Bob Baffert. The suspension follows a failed drug test. Medina Spirit tested positive for betamethasone earlier this month after winning the Kentucky Derby. But the horse came up short at Saturday's Preakness Stakes and finished third. In a statement about the suspension, a New York Racing Association says it must protect the integrity of the sport. Baffert is one of the most successful and recognizable figures in the sport with a record 7 Kentucky Derby wins. He told NBC Sports that there was never any attempt to game or cheat the system. Medina Spirit is also in danger of being stripped of the Kentucky Derby win. There's been mounting pressure and opposition for Pennsylvania to join the RGGI. It's a mandatory market-based program to lower greenhouse gas emissions. A Pennsylvania state senator warns the program will make things worse while doing little to reduce greenhouse gases. NTD's Don Tran has the details.
The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or RGGI, has control over several states when it comes to how much energy they can generate from natural gas. The purpose is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and save the Earth from climate change. They virtually have the entire Northeast in their grasp, except for Pennsylvania. But one state senator says the program is a superficial attempt to fight global warming.
It just makes no sense whatsoever. It's going to do nothing but hurt Pennsylvania. It's going to raise Pennsylvania's electric cost eventually. I mean, the governor says he's going to raise $300 million off of this. Well, where's the $300 million going to come from? It's going to come from the ratepayers.
Pennsylvania's Governor Tom Wolf attempted to bring the state into RGGI. The move is seen as an overreach of power by some lawmakers, and they sent a letter to RGGI to bar the state's entrance unless the legislature approves. Senator Yaw says that not only will the program take away jobs from people in Pennsylvania, energy companies will outsource their labor, which will harm the environment.
I just think that we're kind of being hypocrites about it. The United States, our emissions have basically been flatlined for the past 10 years. Pennsylvania's emissions have gone down by, I think it's something like in the neighborhood of 30% in the last 10 years. So if we don't keep those manufacturing, keep the energy here so that we can support manufacturing, it's going to go somewhere else. It's going to go outside the United States, and it's going to go to locations that have much less environmental concerns than what we have here in the United States.
The senator stressed that the state needs to look at the bigger picture instead of making a knee-jerk reaction in one target area to save some emissions. Don Tran, NTD News.
An attempt to postpone Robert Durst's murder trial has been denied. The multimillionaire is charged with the fatal shooting of Susan Berman in 2000. Durst is accused of killing Berman so that she couldn't incriminate him regarding the 1982 disappearance of his wife, Kathleen McCormick Durst. Lawyers for Durst called for an emergency motion to halt the trial due to health reasons. The 78-year-old Durst has bladder cancer, and his attorneys claim he's not receiving appropriate treatment. This case was put on hold for a year due to the pandemic, but jurors returned for orientation Monday. Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Mark Wyndham says he will eventually hold a hearing to determine if Durst is physically fit to stand trial. Durst's trial is the subject of The Jinx, an HBO documentary. For years, private firefighters in California have defended residents' properties against raging wildfires. While the battle blazes, they also risk getting in the way of government-run fire departments. Now the friction is escalating between government and private firefighters.
Ryan Belanca is the owner of Bella Forestry, a 30-person private firefighting company in California. Last October, he and his crew rescued an upmarket Napa Valley vineyard from the rampant glass fire. But eventually, the state's fire agency, CAL FIRE, stepped in and detained them for several hours, accusing them of lighting dangerous backfires and failing to follow evacuation rules.
We're inside of the zone that at some point was an evacuated area. We then had CAL FIRE's management team come in and ask us to go ahead and evacuate and head on out to incident command so they could understand what we had going on that site. And
some 280 wildland fire contracting companies like Bella Forestry are providing services to private landowners, insurance companies, and government agencies across the country. Instead of fighting fires, many focus on prevention work, like cutting dead tree limbs. But for government firefighters, those private groups can get in the way or even accelerate a fire. That's because they target only a particular property rather than entire communities. President of California Professional Firefighters, Brian Rice, says that without clear regulations on training and equipment maintenance, private firefighters are endangering the lives of all firefighters.
Private contractors acting with independent action, responsible to no one except their insurance company and the bottom line, $1, absolutely are not the answer, nor are they the future. And as president of the California Firefighters, the buck's going to stop here with that.
Rice also points to an incident at California's Point Reyes National Seashore last year. Debris from a burning tree injured 2 private firefighters due to a lack of professional knowledge. Private firefighting became more controversial in the state as a record 4.2 million acres burned last year amid heat waves and dry lightning sieges. California Governor Gavin Newsom said in early April that the state is expecting worse this summer. After an unusually dry winter, the state announced it would invest more than $500 million to improve fire protection and would hire nearly 1,400 additional firefighters.
Up next, Chinese authorities acknowledge recently announced U.S. visa restrictions targeting Chinese Communist Party members and their families. Beijing is acknowledging that the U.S. has suspended visas for Chinese Communist Party officials and their families. The new visa curb applies to officials working at 4 major regime agencies involved in human rights abuses. Here are the details.
Beijing confirmed that the U.S. is rejecting visa applications from the family members of Communist Party officials. A spokesman for China's foreign ministry confirmed the news in a press conference on Thursday. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has ordered the suspension of visas for active members of 4 Communist Party agencies: the China's Immigration Bureau, the State Supervisory Commission, the Ministry of State Security, and the Ministry of Public Security. The order also extends to officials' family members. The policy impacts visas for business, tourism, study, and exchange. The new restriction seems to have already taken effect. A Chinese undergraduate freshman was reportedly rejected by the U.S. Embassy. The student's father works for the China's Ministry of Public Security. The note from U.S. visa officers also mentions the rejection of family members and spouses was issued as per U.S. State Secretary's instructions. A spokeswoman for the Chinese aide says she's just received the related updates. She explained, "I just read about the information. My colleague sent me a U.S. visa alert. It reads that the issuance of visas for the people mentioned and their immediate families are suspended." A week earlier, Blinken's 2020 report on international religious freedom said Chinese citizen Yu Hui would be denied entry to the U.S. along with his immediate family. Blinken cited Yu's involvement in Beijing's widespread persecution of Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation practice founded in 1992 that teaches the principles of truth, compassion, and tolerance. Yu Hui was the director of the former 610 office in Chengdu City, Sichuan Province. The office was set up by former Chinese Communist Party head Jiang Zemin for the purpose of persecuting and eradicating Falun Gong. The practice was deemed illegal in 1999 out of fear that its teachings and widespread popularity would promote a more free-thinking moral society and lead people to question the Communist Party's ultimate authority. Currently, the U.S. has sanctions levied on dozens of Chinese Communist officials for their human rights abuses, including the persecution of Falun Gong and the suppression of Hong Kongers, the Uyghur ethnic minority, and other dissidents. The sanctions ban U.S. entry to these officials and their immediate families. Those blacklisted may also have their U.S. assets frozen with other financial penalties.
The Philippines rejects a demand from Beijing to remove its ships from disputed waters. The nation's president says he will not back down, even if it costs him his life. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on the story.
In his strongest language yet, Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte says he will not yield to Beijing in the South China Sea. In a televised address on Friday, he said, "I will not back down. Kill me if you want to kill me. I will be here. Our friendship will end here." The statement comes against Beijing's call for the Philippines to withdraw vessels from disputed waters in the South China Sea. The Philippines recently boosted its presence in its waters in the defiance of incursions by Chinese ships. Last Wednesday, Beijing sent close to 300 ships into the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. And Duterte says, "We have a stand here, and I want to state it here again. We will not move an inch backward." The Chinese regime self-proclaims over 90% of the South China Sea. This despite a 2016 ruling labeling the claims unlawful. Last week, the Philippine military also announced plans to turn islands in the South China Sea into military hubs. New Zealand police are concerned about the Chinese drones they use. Their report says Chinese-made drones are potential backdoors for Beijing surveillance efforts. These small flying devices could send data to a server located in China. The company behind the drones is China's Dalian Innovations, or DJI. DJI currently dominates the global market. Their products account for 70% of all drones worldwide. The company is based in Shenzhen, China's Silicon Valley. In 2017, the Chinese regime rolled out a law that forces China-based companies to share data with the regime upon request. That same year, the U.S. military warned against using China-made drones. The Australian and the New Zealand military did the same. New Zealand-based aircraft specialist Andrew Shelley told local radio station RNZ his recommendations: police should use the drones without Wi-Fi. New Zealand police are currently using these drones to photograph crime scenes and traffic accidents. In February, they returned a missing hiker to her family using remote-controlled aircrafts.
Still to come, a self-driving car in Arizona brings its trip to a halt after detecting some minor road construction. Road crews were soon sent out to help. And a senator comes to a disturbing conclusion about the cyber attack on the Colonial Pipeline. He says there's no easy fix. Stay tuned to find out more.
This is such a gentle painting, so beautifully portrayed.
A group of people reading together in this simple, everyday-looking living room. A young girl reading along with an adult, a grandparent sitting in the lotus position, a businessman in his typical suit.
You see all those people, they look like they have quietly settled down there. And you as a viewer, it looks like you've just stepped in the door.
You can't see what it is they're reading, so you're a little bit curious and you're kind of invited to walk in.
This harmonious feeling is not by accident. It is the very subject of the work. The book they are reading is the main text of Falun Gong, which is an ancient Chinese spiritual discipline in the Buddhist tradition. At the core of Falun Gong are the values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. Unfortunately, the practice is banned in China, where the artist resides. Thousands have been killed for their faith. Golden energy blooms into the room as a result of their steadfast faith. The painting on the back wall reminds us of this work's title, Plum Blossoms in a Muddy World.
It's also a metaphor for the practitioners that are sitting in the room as plum blossoms.
They signify perseverance and hope that all brutal winters end and life is renewed once again.
The magical painting.
A driverless car in Arizona meets with minor road construction and gets a little confused. A Waymo taxi got stuck at an intersection in Chandler, Arizona. The culprit? Orange cones blocking the street. Passenger Joel Johnson recorded the incident from inside the minivan. Waymo says the car requested help from a remote fleet response specialist. They watch real-time feeds of the fully autonomous vehicles and offer assistance. Unfortunately, the employee provided incorrect guidance and a roadside assistance team had to be called. Once they arrived, the taxi sped away, but then it ran into more cones. Eventually, the car surrendered to a human driver who was able to complete the trip. Waymo is owned by Google's Alphabet. It operates a fleet of some 600 self-driving vehicles that operate in towns south of Phoenix. Following the hacking and shutdown of the Colonial Pipeline, a Republican senator said the country has a serious problem with its cybersecurity. He also said a Green New Deal would make things worse.
Senator Ron Johnson said Sunday that the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack and shutdown exposed existential-level vulnerabilities in America's fuel and electrical grid. Johnson said cybersecurity is a devil of a problem, adding there are no easy solutions. Colonial Pipeline, which delivers about 45% of the fuel consumed on the East Coast, halted operations last week after revealing it had been targeted by hackers. The shutdown affected gasoline supplies in parts of the East Coast, with some people waiting for hours at gas stations. The situation got worse from panic buying. Colonial said Saturday it has returned its systems to normal operations. The Wisconsin Republican said part of the fix is holding cyber attackers accountable. He said these hacker groups should be made to pay for these types of intrusions. Johnson also argued that the Democrats' Green New Deal would make the problem worse. He said Biden's plan to adopt some of the proposals in the Green New Deal could make the country's power grid more vulnerable. The senator said, with everybody hooking up their solar panels and hooking into the grid so they can get a few shekels for the electricity they're selling into the grid, we become more and more vulnerable, arguing that it will create more points of contact that cyber attackers can exploit.
The average price of gas in the U.S. hit a 7-year high on Monday. Many gas stations in the southeast are still without fuel as the region slowly recovers from a cyber attack on the nation's largest fuel pipeline. NTD's Christina Kim takes a look.
Retail gasoline prices in the U.S. hit a 7-year high on Monday, even after Colonial Pipeline resumed normal service over the weekend. AAA said the national gas price on Monday hit $3.04 a gallon, the highest since October 2014. Colonial Pipeline delivers around 45% of the fuel for the East Coast. It halted operations last week after hackers attacked it. The shutdown stopped millions of barrels of gasoline and diesel from flowing to the East Coast, causing panic buying of fuel and a surge in prices. A spokesperson for AAA said the Southeast would continue to experience tight supply this week as terminals and gas stations get refueled. AAA also expects more price fluctuations leading up to Memorial Day weekend. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Ron Johnson says the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack has exposed existential-scale vulnerabilities in America's fuel and electrical grid.
What we should all take away from this is understand how incredibly vulnerable our fuel grid is, our electrical grid is, and do something about it.
Johnson called for the investment in backup systems and for those responsible for the attack to be punished. Christina Kim, NTD News.
If you use Google Photos to back up your memories, listen up. In 2 weeks, you'll no longer have unlimited storage. Google announced last year that come June 1st, any new photos and videos customers upload will count toward the free 15 gigabytes of storage that comes with Google accounts. All content uploaded before that date will not affect those 15 gigabytes. If you need more storage, well, it'll cost you. Plans start as low as $199 a month for 100 gigabytes. Next up, PPE waste is polluting the environment. In Wales, a company is recycling the masks, gowns, and other personal protective equipment into blocks of plastic using a unique machine. And a small island off the coast of Naples is named Italy's Capital of Culture for 2022. Residents there are thrilled by the recognition and hope it will revive the island's economy. Find out more in just a minute here on NTD News. A cyclone on India's west coast has killed at least 19 people and damaged infrastructure and agriculture. This as heavy rains continue to lash some regions.
A powerful cyclone has left a trail of destruction along the northwestern coast of India. Packing winds of 130 miles per hour, Cyclone Torte made landfall late on Monday, uprooting trees and electricity lines. Authorities are now concerned about the steady supply of oxygen to hospitals, overwhelmed by COVID-19. The storm has hampered India's fight against the disease. Ahead of Torte's arrival, hundreds of thousands of people had to be evacuated from coastal areas in the state of Gujarat. Vaccinations were suspended for 2 days, while hospitals awaited backup generators to keep power running. The cyclone weakened after it made landfall, but at least a dozen people have already died in the storm. The Indian Navy said it had rescued 146 people for one of 2 barges that were adrift near the Mumbai coastline. In Gujarat, no damages have been reported at the refineries and seaports that were expected to be in the storm's path. The country's biggest private port was able to open on Tuesday. The cyclone was the most powerful one to hit India in more than 2 decades.
A company in Wales has developed a new way to help the environment. It's recycling PPE waste, like masks, into new products and reducing pollution. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Millions of single-use face masks, gowns, and curtains have helped the fight against the pandemic. But the items have also created thousands of tons of waste. One company in Wales says it has the solution: specialist machines that convert used PPE into reusable plastic.
We have a number of trusts now using our machines, and specifically to take out the plastics and also the face masks, which has become a huge problem in the current pandemic.
Face masks go inside the machine for about an hour. What comes out is a 40-pound block of plastic. They're already being reused to make things like toolboxes and new school chairs. It's estimated that over the past 12 months, almost 20 billion disposable masks have been used in the UK alone. But that's still a tiny portion of the 240 million tons of waste the country produces each year. Demand for PPE remains steady, and being able to recycle pandemic waste could provide a long-term solution. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
As the lockdown eases in England, pubs, bars, and restaurants are welcoming customers indoors. This time, there are no curfews or rules about having a substantial meal with your drink. NTD's Jane Worrell has more.
After several months of only serving takeaways, this 24-hour cafe prepares to welcome customers just after midnight on Monday morning.
Yeah, we're dead excited. We've been waiting for this for quite a while, to be honest, and yeah, we're just waiting for the customers to come back, hoping that they'll be confident enough to come and dine in, which I think most people are now, and we're obviously COVID safe.
The cafe has been in the family since 1959 and is located in the heart of the capital's financial district.
There's been peaks and troughs, there's been recessions, there's been, bombings, there's been, fairly different times. I think the most recent lockdown and sort of COVID has been unprecedented. To get back to the hustle and bustle of where we were pre-COVID probably will take a little bit longer than, this year. We're looking at next year to be a better year.
While it wasn't packed, people were happy to be back.
Most venues in the capital, though, reopened indoors during the day. For many people, it feels like a step closer to normality.
It's so nice. It feels like life's getting back to normal again. It's also still freezing outside, so don't have to eat food within 2 minutes to stop it from getting too cold.
The idea of eating outside was nice, but only nice once, and then you soon realise that actually it's too cold to eat outside.
This time around, there isn't a curfew on pubs and bars or the rule to have a substantial meal with a drink. A relief to be open for restaurants like this one, with staff happy to be making dishes for their customers again.
Good, nervous. Excited. There's always a little bit of a worry at the back of my head, but that's part of my job. But generally very positive. Everybody is engaged, our colleagues are all engaged, and we have a lot of reservations, so it's hopefully this is it, from here on.
It's hoped that all restrictions will be eased by June 21st. A government review of this is expected at the end of May. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
The small island of Procida in the Bay of Naples has been nominated the Capital of Italian Culture 2022. Residents there are hoping the title will help revive the local economy. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
The small island of Procida has just been announced as Italy's capital of culture for 2022. Despite being featured in well-known films like Il Postino and The Talented Mr. Ripley, locals say tourists often overlook Procida in favor of its larger sister islands, Capri and Ischia. But now, the inhabitants are delighted their island's profile is being raised. The hope is they'll soon be able to welcome visitors from around the globe as the pandemic fades. Long-term resident Gemma Ventrice is overjoyed at Procida's new status.
This is a great satisfaction for us, having this small island and being world famous. It's too wonderful. It was an immense joy when they gave us the news, for me and for all of us, for all residents of Procida.
In the sleepy port of Coricella, fisherman Francesco Trapani puts the emphasis on employment and restaurants.
We hope it will get better, that the people of Procida will do great things, all of us. There will be more employment, restaurants will be busy, everything will be better because the island has to raise its head.
Procida Mayor Raimondo Ambrosino says the island has a lot to offer. The main events planned for 2022 will center on art, music, literature, food, and architecture.
Procida is a coming together of all Mediterranean cultures, one which came to the island thanks to shipping, because in the history of Procida, the sea has always been the connecting element, the one which allowed us to be in contact with many countries in the Mediterranean and worldwide.
Procida also claims to be the first pandemic-free Italian island as of May 4th. That's after completing its vaccination campaign. According to Mayor Ambrosino, there are 40 positive cases on the island at the moment, but he hopes the island will be free of the virus shortly. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all for now. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.